Hello, and welcome to Module 2 of the Introduction to Mentalisation-Based Treatment. So what we're hoping to do in this second module is to maybe start to develop our understanding a bit further around this thing we call mentalising, but with a particular focus on what it means when we have maybe problems with mentalising. So as I was saying in the first module, we all have the capacity to mentalise, but we're also prone to error. And for some people, this being prone to error in our mentalising can happen more frequently, and it can be very problematic in really trying to maybe maintain relationships and to have some consistency in our lives. So we're going to try now and sort of explore this in a bit more detail as to why that might be. So to sort of get us thinking about problems with mentalising, we're going to use what we refer to as a reflective activity, and we use this in our groups, and we sort of look at this scenario and then have some group discussions. So if I just pause for a minute and just think back a little bit to the previous module around mentalising and how that was, we were sort of identifying that was a skill, and it was a skill to be able to sort of reflect on what drives our behaviour and how important it is in making sense of our interactions with each other, and also building some resilience in sort of helping us to work through inevitable misunderstandings that might happen when we're interacting with each other. So if you kind of hold that in your minds whilst we have a little think about this and explore this scenario. So in this scenario, it's Michelle's birthday, and he's planning on celebrating it with Layla, his girlfriend. So he's invited her over and he's cooked up the dinner, and he's got some wine, and he's sort of really looking forward to spending some time with her. Now when Layla arrives, she doesn't have a gift. And she says to Michelle, "Wow, what a dinner you've made, and on a Tuesday." Now, during the dinner, Michelle is very quiet and he drinks most of the wine himself. So what I really want to invite you to sort of to think about really is looking at this scenario and sort of thinking about what's happening here. Why do you think Michelle and Layla behave the way they do? So I'm just going to give you a few minutes to sort of think about that. So here are a few ideas, some themes which have come up when we've thought about this in our groups. Mostly people have some sense that Michelle is upset because Layla's forgotten his birthday. But different people sort of tune into different emotional states. So some think that he might be feeling sort of hurt, that he might be feeling sad. Others have wondered if he feels quite angry about Layla not remembering his birthday. And others turn their attention to thinking about his drinking. Why is he drinking most of the wine? And they wondered about if he's trying to sort of dampen his feelings by drinking. Now, we've not given you very much information in that scenario, and often people want more information so they can try and make more sense of it. They want to know how long have they been together? Did Layla even know it was his birthday? If they haven't known each other for very long, she might not know. So there isn't very much for you to go to really dig into it. But some things that might be worth reflecting on is to just think about, why do we think that if she did or she didn't know, but maybe we wonder why Michelle didn't let her know. You know, why didn't he mention it during a meal? But there's something that sort of prevented him from doing that. So he wasn't able to acknowledge his birthday, and that's why he'd gone to this effort. And some people have wondered if he felt a bit embarrassed, that by sort of acknowledging that it was his birthday, that he wanted to somehow feel special, and that might feel too revealing, that might make him feel a bit vulnerable. So that might be one of the possibilities as to why he didn't actually just say, well, you forgot my birthday. So when we start to look at these everyday scenarios like this one, we can see how it can become quite complex in trying to sort of interact with each other. And these situations sort of draw out the complexities of this thing we're calling mentalising. So in that last slide we were just reflecting on, I suppose both Michelle and Layla's poor mentalising really. They weren't really able to engage in a conversation to try and understand what was going on. So here we're just going to now sort of think a little bit more about what does poor mentalising look like? So how might we know if we're not in sort of that more mentalising sort of stance, if we've kind of lost it a bit or it's been undermined in some ways? So that first one, that feeling certain about other people's motives, so that feeling very, very absolute in our minds, as if we can know what's in the other person's mind. And that's something we've referred to in the previous module. So the sort of comment here is, I know why he's being so quiet. He doesn't like me. So we've seen something, we've taken something externally, someone being quiet, and then we've decided that they don't like us, and that's become very, very certain. We just know it's a known state. There's no flexibility in thinking there. There can be a sort of focus on labeling people and just like they're lazy or clever, they're tired. You know, so this idea around just giving somebody a label, or also this can be an overgeneralizing. You always do this, or you never listen to me. So it becomes maybe somebody who has experienced somebody not listening to them on some occasions, but then it becomes all the time. There can be a sort of excessive detail, so very elaborate stories and wanting to go into great detail. But there can be a lack of understanding what other people's motivations or any of the feelings or thoughts within the situation might be. And something here we refer to as sort of black and white thinking. And that sort of idea around the black and white thinking is that there seems to be limited nuances to what's going on. So it's an either or, it's a good or bad, it's a it's a right or wrong. So things sort of go into those sorts of sort of clear sort of extremes. So here we have how somebody can sort of by forgetting something, they then go into this very denigrating, very self-critical but negative way of talking to themselves. So they say, that's just so typical of me. I forgot my sister's birthday again. I'm so useless. I can't get anything right. In fact, I'm an idiot and I deserve to be punished. So everything's gone to the extremely negative and position. There's no nuances in thinking about, oh, I forgot my sister's birthday, and well, that's a shame, and thinking about what consequences of that might be. It's become this very critical, this person's become very bad in their mind. Here's a few more. So kind of focusing on external factors at the expense of mental states. So I suppose something here might be something external. So if I was to say, well, I had a headache and that's why I lashed out at them. Here I focused on a factor, an external factor in my headache, without really trying to explore what the context was of my lashing out, what was going on between me and the other person, what was going on for me internally, those inner states. So it's just that one focus on the external factor, sort of is where my focus goes. We could have a preoccupation with sort of rules and responsibilities. So the sort of shoulds and shouldn'ts. Again, that can fall into that sort of black and white sort of thing. It's either it's got to be this way or that way. And trying to tease out a little bit more about why somebody might have done something, but being very clear that it's a rule and it's been broken. There can be a difficulty in accepting that we might be involved in some way in a problem or a difficulty. So if we feel something's happening and it keeps happening to us, we might struggle to be able to think about, well, I wonder why, I wonder what's going on in these interactions, these interpersonal relationships whereby this problem might keep happening. It might be the same kind of problem. So that struggle to sort of see where we are in something as well. There can be lots of words spoken. It can kind of lots of detail, lots of storytelling, even cliches. Sort of. I'm trying to think of a cliche now, but I suppose something like absence makes the heart grow fonder would be one cliche, I suppose. But there can be use of these kind of stories or cliches, and there seems to be a lack of really sort of understanding what's going on between people. So it kind of gets overly focused on all this excessive information. And then this kind of blaming or what we might call fault finding, without much curiosity of trying to find out what's going on for other people. So, and it can also, that can also come into play a bit with emotions. If we were to get angry, we might sort of blame the other person for making us angry. It's their fault. That's why I'm angry. And that really, again, is poor mentalising, because we're not able to think about where we are in that. What's going on for us? What triggered that intense emotional state? So the reason that we're focusing in on this mentalising, and it's because of the kind of the consequences, I suppose, of what can occur if that's becoming a sort of an area in which we're realising that it's happening a lot, that we're really struggling to sort of maintain that mentalising stance. And one of the areas in particular that I suppose we've been drawing attention to is our relationships with others. So there can be recurrent problems in sort of maintaining both intimate relationships, but also maybe relationships with work colleagues and other people. But it can really have a significant impact there. And that can be connected to this sort of misunderstanding that continually goes on, and that happens for all of us. We're always, we're that prone to that error, but it's how we then manage those misunderstandings, and that's where, if we have poor mentalising, we really struggle to manage those misunderstandings. And sometimes our behaviour that can leave others feeling a bit confused, because our behaviour might be different to what the expectation is, so that can leave others feeling quite confused. We might, if we've got poor mentalising, we might react more frequently in a quite a sort of an emotional way. So trying to find that balance between our cognition, our thoughts, and our feelings. But if we're always in a much more of an emotional sort of area, then we might find that we're struggling with mentalizing. And that can lead to us not understanding sometimes, feeling able to understand our own behaviour, not wanting to keep reacting in the way that we might be, but also struggling to know how to not respond in that way. And there can be feelings of insecurity, of not knowing who we are, as a sort of feeling an unstable sense of self, and that can then require an over-reliance on others telling us how we are, who we are, what they think of how we're behaving. So a constant need for confirmation about ourselves from others. And those emotions can become overwhelming. The intensity of the emotional states can be such that it really impacts then on that reflecting, that capacity to maintain that thinking. And it can also lead to impulsive behaviours, which we will explore a lot more detail around that in as we move through the programme, and particularly around diagnoses, and we look at how our emotional states can really impact on our behaviour. When we're thinking about these causes of poor mentalising, this is where emotions and emotional states are extremely important, and it can be both an overwhelming emotional state, so where emotions feel so intense and can be experienced in quite a sort of an intense and overwhelming way, but equally feel as though there's a lack of an emotional state, so people can feel that they don't feel any emotions. So both of those, which are obviously the extremes of feeling so emotional all the time or not feeling you have emotions, this can be a cause of sort of poor mentalising. So we'll just go on and have a little think now a bit around our emotional states in the next slide. So here's a sort of visual image, really. We call it the emotional thermometer, to just give you an idea of that feeling, that sort of those two extremes where they are. So that kind of overwhelmed, hot. You know, people have described feeling like there's a mist that comes over them at times, where they can get so feeling angry and enraged that they're not even aware of what's going on. And then other people at the other end of that spectrum, they're at the bottom of the thermometer, is feeling very detached and very sort of cut off, is a term that's often used by people, that they don't feel connected to other people. They feel, yeah, sort of numb. And others have maybe then described them as feeling quite cold when they're trying to relate with them. And so both of those extreme states really impact on our mentalising and our capacity to mentalise. You see that range in the middle is where we want to get to, where we move up and down the thermometer with our emotional states depending on what situations we're in, what we're having to do, how we're challenged in our daily lives, you know, what's going on for us. So we all feel varying degrees on this thermometer of our emotional states. But if we can stay somewhere in that more middle ground where the green is, that will help us maintain this mentalising. So that's what we refer to there as the mentalising range. And as you get to the top end there, the overwhelming, you can see it says fight or flight. Now that's a response which we will go on to discuss in much more detail in the following module around emotions. Because this idea now around emotions is so significant in regards to our mentalising. And that's why we've got a whole module on emotions coming up. So we'll explore that in more detail. So just to sort of, I suppose, conclude this section, and just to highlight these sort of key important sort of points really, that our feelings are activated sort of at different sort of intensities and at different speeds for different people. So that will vary, that we're all individuals, and so the way in which we feel emotions and the speed at which they're activated is variable. And the fight-flight response, I didn't go into too much detail about that. Some of you will know what it is, but as I said, I'm really focusing on that in the next module around emotions. But that's an inbuilt response we have, and it relates to feeling under threat. But that fight-flight response, we have different thresholds for that, and again, that's a personal thing that depends very much on the individual. But we can look at that, but that really impacts on this emotional arousal. And the time it takes to sort of go back to what we might feel is a more normal state in ourselves, that can vary. So that intensity, turning it back down, can really vary again for individuals. And if this mentalizing range that we've referred to in the previous slide, that sort of green block, which was in the middle of the emotional thermometer, so it's to bear in mind that if the intensity or the lack of emotional state, so either turning it down or turning it up, but that intensity, that can be controlled, and therefore that threshold can be raised, and the time it takes before we get back to our normal state can be reduced, or equally if we want to sort of turn the heat up a bit. So these are things that can with time and understanding, if more we develop our understanding, they can change. And so that helps then, this mentalizing range, so that enables us to widen that range. So as I was saying in our previous slide, we often set a sort of mentalizing task at the end of each group for the group members to then come back the following week and think with us about, see if any of this sort of ideas within the module has made any sense or has resonated. And the one we often ask people to consider following this module is to sort of just make a note of any situation during the week in which they've noticed their ability to mentalize has been undermined. So if at some point they felt that they haven't been able to maintain that mentalizing stance, just to make a note of it and see if they can try and understand a little bit about why. So it's really just to sort of encourage some personal reflection about that, based on what you've maybe taken from today's session.